You're listening to the Patriot Nation Podcast.
All right, welcome into another edition of the Patriot Nation Podcast. It's your boy Pat Lane, as always, with my guy Matt St. Jean. And this episode, as all the episodes are brought to you by Prize Picks, which is the official daily sports fantasy app of CLNS. So download the app and put in the code CLNS, and they will match up to 100. They will match 100% up to $100 of your initial deposit. So download Prize Picks now. And Matt, here we are. It's our last show before it's legal to tamper with people. I'm very excited. Very excited.
It's almost tamper time. It's next Monday. I'm excited to finally get to put some dots on this board right here. And
so good.
Put some pieces on the board, and then we can start to see what the strategy is. And the Patriots got a little bit ahead of it today, making some moves too.
And I want them to tamper the hell out of everyone. Just tamper everyone, dude. It's gonna be so good. Just everyone. You have so much money. Just go and tamper.
Throwing cash around.
I love it. We'll see. But I don't know how much money they're going to actually spend, but we'll go from there. So, all right, to get to your point though, you kind of set it up there. The Patriots did make a move today. Bringing in, now here's what's interesting about this. And it's so funny because my dad texted me. He's like, "Is he related to the basketball player?" And I'm like, "No, he's not, because he has a different last name." But he looks like Emeka Okafor, like UConn Emeka Okafor. For those of you that I don't know if you remember, I know you remember Emeka Okafor. I don't know if people out there listening remember Emeka Okafor, but it is not. He is not related to Emeka Okafor because his last name is Okorafor, and so it's close, but not quite. And I think the people call him Chucks. I think that's what I saw. I saw Taylor referring to him as Chucks, but I think it's Chukwuma Okorafor, who was a starting tackle for the Steelers, played primarily right tackle, and was fine. He was fine. He's a depth guy, and so look, I'm a little scarred from last year. The Patriots bringing in only Calvin Anderson and Riley Reef at tackle. I'm a little scarred by that. So I was not super pleased about the move today. But if it's a depth move, and if you're looking at him as your probable swing tackle, I'm okay with it. I'm on board with it. If this is a way to say, we don't have to spend as much money on Mike Onwenu as we want, and we don't know if this is like we see the writing on the wall and we're not going to re-sign Mike Onwenu, I hate it. But hopefully that's not the case.
When I look at the tackle group you've got now, and you've got, I think, Calvin Anderson, Connor McDermott, and Okorafor here, all as guys who are veterans, who have started at some point, who are swing tackle capable level players. Obviously, things didn't go well for Calvin Anderson last year, not for football reasons. That was all off-field health stuff. And now that he appears to be fully healthy, according to his Twitter account, and will hopefully get a full offseason with the team and be back fully in football shape, he can be what the Patriots thought he'd be last year. Because remember, they thought he was going to compete for the starting job last year. They really liked him. I know PFF liked him at points when he was in Denver, too, with some of the stuff he did out there. So you get those three veterans who I think you like to be depth pieces, guys who can start for you, if needed, in a pinch, a game, 2 games, 3 games, whatever it ends up being. And then you still have Vidarian Lowe, who's kicking around with another year of development, new offensive line coach. They tendered Tyrone Wheatley, the tackle that they traded for from the Browns last year, who has worked with these coaches before and who's familiar. And, he's very much a question mark at this point. But 2 developmental guys there who they want to keep around and, bring into camp. That's 5 players where if you say, hey, we're breaking camp, and 2 or 3 of these guys are on the team and another 1 or 2 are on the practice squad, I think you probably feel good about your depth. Now, the starters, that's the next question. If they don't sign Onwenu, I think you can piece together a starting right tackle with the guys that they have. It's not going to be a great starting right tackle, but I think it's with an eye towards, hey, this is a bridge for a future starting right tackle. This is how we hold the ship together until we can draft somebody we like. Um, and then I'm assuming you're probably signing or drafting somebody this year to be your left tackle. We've heard the whispers about Tyron Smith. If you get this group plus Michael Wenu and Tyron Smith, I think you have to feel much, much better about your tackle situation than you did at least, the midpoint of last year when they were really, really grasping at straws.
Yeah. No, and that's look, I get it. I understand. I'm just concerned. And like you said, they have a ton of depth at this point now, right? And so that concerns me. And maybe they decided to move on from Mike Onwenu. And look, maybe like you said, he's not a great scheme fit. We've talked about Onwenu, kind of at length here about whether he is a scheme fit or not. And I guess he's not maybe not the best scheme fit, but he's the best offensive lineman on the team. And so you'd like to think you'd want to bring that guy back, right? And so, yeah, you're right. They could go out and get a right tackle, maybe try to get a developmental guy, maybe sign Tyron Smith at left tackle. Maybe they think they're okay if they can start one of those guys at right tackle. And Calvin Anderson is interesting, right? You said he posted something on Instagram, which he did. He said he almost lost his life. Now, we don't know exactly what was going on, but clearly it was something serious. And so I'm curious I don't know if we'll ever find out 100% what it was, but but it's good to see that he's back. And like you said, Wheatley's back. Alex Austin, by the way, and Thad just mentioned it too. Alex Austin is back as well, another exclusive rights free agent, just like Wheatley. So makes sense to bring him back as well. So, but it's the offensive lines. To me, the offensive line. I mean, look, we all know the wide receiver situation. We all know the quarterback situation. But the offensive line, to me, is a place that I feel like they ignored a little bit last year, and it just hasn't been as good as you want it to be. And so before we can really move forward, especially if we're going to draft a young quarterback, before we can really move forward, we need to improve the offensive line, and that starts for sure at the tackle position. And so, we'll see. I think it's a good depth move, but we'll see what it leads to.
Yeah, I like the thing with Onwenu is that I think there's still question. There's really three parts of the Onwenu thing that complicate it. One, we're still not entirely sure what position he's going to play, where he wants to play, where NFL teams want him to play. Two, we don't know what his scheme fit is like in New England. And three, he is negotiating for himself and doesn't have an agent. All of those are factors that will complicate a negotiation. Now you look at Dotson from the Rams, the guard who just signed an extension to stay in LA today. He's getting, I think, 16 mil a year on his extension, which what I will say, that's the originally reported number. A lot of times the first number that's reported is inflated, and that's kind of your if everything maxes out. So I'm guessing that annual number is actually going to be a little bit lower than that, but that's a high number. If that's how it is, and Onwenu is, as people have said, the best free agent offensive lineman out there, he might clear $20 million. I don't know if he's worth that. And that's where, this is a tough game for New England to play because on one hand, you don't want to lose the guy who might be the best player on your offense. But the flip side is with where you're going into the future, he might not be the best player in your offense. And do you want to pay a guy $20 million a year to be, hopefully by the end of this whole thing, your second or third best offensive lineman who might be playing guard?
Right.
That I think becomes a question. I think the other factor here, something we haven't talked about, if we look forward to the draft, a lot of the top tackles are guys who play right tackle. Usually it's left tackle heavy. There's more right tackles at the top. And if you're New England and you like the right tackle class and you're not sure where Onwenu slides in and he's getting a ton of money, so a world where you say we're going to sign Tyron Smith to play left tackle, and we have a bunch of swing tackles we feel can start if needed, and we're going to trade back, and we're going to use a first-round pick, or we're going to use our second-round pick, or whatever on one of these right tackles who we think is a plug-and-play starter. and you might get the same quality of play you're getting from Michael Onwenu, who I think is just a decent, maybe good tackle. He's definitely not a great tackle. He's not an elite tackle because he has issues with the speed rush. Might get the same quality of play year one for a much, much cheaper contract, and then you can go use that extra money on Christian Wilkins or Jeffrey Simmons, who just became a free agent today, or Calvin Ridley, or whoever it is that you have your eyes on. And balancing that, I think, is going to be tough here for the Patriots.
Yeah. No, listen, it's true. It's a good point. What's challenging for me, this is the big thing, the biggest thing that's challenging for me is that you let Joe Thuney walk and got nothing back. You let Shaq Mason walk and got almost nothing back. You let Ted Karras walk and got nothing back. So you had all of these guys. You had all of these good offensive linemen. You let them all go and got nothing back. And it's just, and I know I understand that that's not this. I get that you can't, try to combat the mistakes of the past. Certainly if the mistakes of the past weren't you.
Yeah.
But, to let those three guys walk and get basically nothing. I mean, they got a fifth-round pick for Shaq Mason or something like that. Like, you let those three guys walk and got basically nothing back for them.
Yeah.
To me, it's just inexcusable. It's inexcusable. And you're gonna be in the same situation here because you have enough cap space that you have to sign free agents. You don't have a choice. You're below the floor here. So you have to, even if they're not going to break the bank, even if they're not going to light that money on fire, like Gerard Mayo initially said, they still have to sign some guys. And so they're not going to get a third-round pick back, right? And so that's where it becomes challenging for me is like, man, you're going to let another guy walk and get nothing back for him? And that, it just sucks. And I get it, fine, but that's really tough. And like old man mom says, then they use the first round pick on Cole Strange. So you let all those guys walk and then use a first round pick. It's just like
and then to have the guy, be just kind of okay and dealing with injuries now and with Strange, because that's the other part. For as bad as tackle is, guard has been an issue for them too. So it's tough to figure out what you do going forward. I do think if they overpay what they think Michael Onwenu is worth to keep him, just because they're trying to fix the mistake of letting Joe Thuney walk, that right there is the exact kind of thing that we've been making fun of, like the Jets or the Dolphins or the Bills for doing for years. So, it's walking a fine line here. And I hope that the front office is not making decisions based on what the fans want here, because it's not a popularity contest to build out a team, and you do have to make hard decisions. And just, being pressured by the fans into spending money on players that you don't really love isn't the way to build, forget a contender, to get yourself any kind of sustained success.
Right. You're not wrong. You're totally not wrong. I just that's it's just frustrating. It's frustrating to see. That's all.
Yep. And you look at the interior offensive line, that's a spot where you probably want to build out some depth. David Andrews is nearing the end of his career. They got Jake Andrews behind him. He's still a question mark at this point. Cole Strange is, we haven't heard any reports on him since he got put on injured reserve, but I think it's fair to assume he's probably going to miss a substantial part of the offseason recovering from an injury. Right. And that's going to be really tough for his development. Sidy Sow was good relative to the standards of the New England offensive line last year, but he needs development to become, I think, a guy you really count on to be a starter. And, this is the part that's tough. Like, they need to build out the offensive line, but I'm not sure you're signing somebody over Sidy Sow because he's young enough that you want to play him and develop him. And I don't know if you're signing somebody over Cole Strange because he's young enough you want to develop him. You're not signing somebody over David Andrews. You'll sign a backup, sure, like backup guards. And it's hard to find starting tackles in free agency. So you end up at this point where you have all this money and you want to address a problem. But I don't know if the money can be used to fix the problem. I think in some ways you only fix the offensive line if we look long term, is draft capital and development. And that might mean playing a bunch of younger guys this year. Let's say they start City So and they roll with him, and they draft a tackle and they start him. And those guys might not be good, but you got to play through it until you get to whatever is on the other side and hope they develop. So for as bad as the offensive line is, there's a chance that the best way forward is, one step back now to take 2 steps forward going into the future. But that's going to be a tough pill to swallow come the first Sunday, second Sunday in September.
Yeah. No, you're right. And it's tough. It's one of those tough things for me. And I don't know the right answer. That's the hard part is I don't know the right answer. I'm not sure what the answer is. I just need to know they have a plan. And again, like I said last year, I'm scarred by the fact that last year they didn't have a plan. So I'm hoping with the new regime they have a plan for what they're going to do at offensive line. And so we'll see. We'll see where they go. Old Man Mob asked a question about Judon getting traded. So Matthew Judon, just to recap, because we are going to go through this again. Matthew Judon needs a new contract. He got a pay raise last year. They gave him the Stephon Gilmore treatment, which means that they borrowed from the year after. They borrowed from the next year to give him extra money that year. So they borrowed from 2024 to give him extra money in 2023. Now it's nice in 2023, but now in 2024, he's not making enough money. He's not. Let's just be honest. He's not making enough money. And so they're going to have to give him a new contract or they're going to have to trade him. Now, it didn't go well with Gilmore. They thought that he was aging. They didn't want to pay him a new contract. Turns out that was a very wrong decision. They should have signed Stephon Gilmore. And that's another situation where, and look, we can go back and criticize Belichick for some of the different things that he's done. I think the way he handled the offensive line and the way he handled the cornerback position are two things that are just indefensible in my opinion, right?
The Stephon Gilmore saga with the injury stuff too got weird and felt personal at some points.
I didn't like it.
So.
And again, you traded Stephon Gilmore for a 6th round pick the following year, which was essentially what you would have gotten for him. You would have gotten more for him if you had just held on to him. He literally sat on the bench all year, didn't play, and then went into free agency and signed with someone. You would have gotten a better pick for him than you did when you traded him. Whatever. Fine. So you trade him there, get nothing back. Great. J.C. Jackson gets signed to L.A., signs a massive contract. And this is one of the reasons why I hate the new rule is, and I get it, I understand it, but it's stupid. So J.C. Jackson should have gotten you a 3rd round pick back. But because he got hurt and was out for the year, you only got a 4th round pick back. And that to me is stupid. Why should it depend on what he does the next year? It should depend on the contract, right? And so because he didn't play enough games.
Yeah. Well, did it have to do with the contract? Did he get paid less money?
No, I think he got paid enough. But he had to reach a certain threshold to get a 3rd round pick back for the Patriots. And because he didn't reach that certain threshold, he didn't get a 3rd round pick, which is stupid. I'm just like, what the hell, man? So we'll see. And Old Man Mom mentioned it. We wish they had traded players at the deadline, right? Josh Uche is a guy that I don't know if he might be back, but he's a guy that we could have gotten something for. Didn't trade him. But again, why is Bill Belichick going to trade those guys in the offseason? At the deadline, especially if he thinks his job's on the line, right? So it's a tough situation, unfortunately, but that's where we're at right now, and we're left with a ton of questions.
Yeah, we're getting. Yeah. Do we want to talk about? Do we want to go back over to the offense and talk skill positions here when we're looking at free agency?
Let's do it. Yep.
I've been doing some free agency primers over on Pat's Pulpit that you guys should definitely go check out. And I did a list of a bunch of receivers I thought could end up in New England. The top guy, Mike Evans, off the market. Another guy, Michael Pittman, off the market. T. Higgins was off the market before I wrote the piece. So the best guys on the market are Hollywood Brown and Calvin Ridley. And those guys feel like Hollywood Brown probably less so. He might actually end up being, a decent signing because of some of the ups and downs he's had. He might come cheaper. But Calvin Ridley is a guy who feels like he is going to get paid wide receiver 1 money when he is most definitely a wide receiver 2.
Mm-hmm.
And this again puts you in the position, if you're New England, do you want to go spend $20-25 million a year or whatever it might end up being? Maybe a quarter of the money you got to spend this cycle on a receiver who is just good.
Yeah. You can't. I love the idea of bringing someone like Calvin Ridley in.
Yeah.
If I have to pay him the money of a wide receiver 1, I'm not doing it. I'm just not doing it. Does he have the potential to be a wide receiver 1? It's possible. But, am I going to bank on him being a wide receiver 1? I'm not. I'm definitely not. And so, and a ton of people have already pointed this out, and I think it's worth mentioning again and again and again and again. If you want a number 1 wide receiver, you either have to trade a high pick for him or you have to draft and develop him. Because teams are not letting those guys walk. They're not. They will do whatever they have to do to keep those guys. Again, unless they're getting a high draft pick back, right? The Colts, that's the Pittman one to me. I was like, that never made sense to me. You drafted a quarterback in the top 5. You drafted a quarterback at 5 last year. Now you're going to let your number 1 wide receiver walk? That's insane.
Especially when they had a ton of money.
Right. So that was never going to happen. The Evans one I thought was more likely. But again, if you're Tampa, you made it worth his while. Now, we'll talk about Baker Mayfield and whether he'll be back or not in Tampa. I kind of feel like he might, but then again, I don't know. So we'll see. But to Evans, it didn't necessarily matter. Evans has put up numbers no matter who the quarterback's been down there. So
over 1,000 yards every single season in his career.
Every year.
You mentioned, I want to come back to the receiver in a second, but you mentioned Baker Mayfield.
Mm-hmm.
Diana Rossini said, I think earlier today or yesterday, that at the combine, the numbers being floated around for Baker Mayfield started with a 4. If that dude is getting over $40 million a year, I am out. I like Baker Mayfield. I think he could be a good signing for New England, especially if they are not sold on the quarterback talent at the top and want to kick the can down the road on the quarterback question. I'm not doing that for $40 million a year off of one good season with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and all the receivers they got down in Tampa. I'm not taking that bet. I'd rather sign Jacoby Brissett for whatever he's going to end up getting.
Right. I could not agree more. I like Baker, but I don't like him that much. I think that Brissett fits well. I'm starting to think. Oh God, Matt. I'm starting to think. Okay, I gotta breathe. Through this one. I'm starting to think that the play might be to move out of 3, move down to 11, 12, 13, and try to draft AJ McCarthy.
I think
or if McCarthy goes before that, drafting a tackle or a wide receiver, depending on who's available there, and then drafting Penix at 34.
I think the other thing here is, if you're depending on any kind of trade back of what you're able to do, let's say it's the one that I think we like the most is, if you can get the Raiders or somebody to give you the Trey Lance trade and you get multiple future first rounders,
right?
You move back. And, we just said, there's no real way to address offensive line in free agency. You can't fix it in free agency this year, really. You can use that first pick on a tackle, the second or the third tackle off the board, or, whatever it ends up being.
Right.
And in your second round pick, you can grab a wide receiver. And because that's the other position where you're not going to fix this in free agency. Players just are not there. You could spend all the money the Patriots have on wide receivers. You're not going to fix it with the guys available. And you could do that and maybe double dip at wide receiver, draft a tight end in there, draft another offensive lineman later, and try to really flesh out those positions and use those future firsts and use one of them on whoever your quarterback of the future ends up being and take him next year or the year after and have a bridge starter right now, regardless of whatever name you want to put in there for that role. Because that's just, you get so many holes on this team. And, in free agency, I don't think they're going to improve offensive tackle. I think they can improve wide receiver, but you're going to go from like a D to a C. So I don't think you're going to feel great about that. Tight end, maybe you improve, but Hunter Henry is one of the better tight ends out. And if you go for a different top tight end, you're probably just going for a younger version of that. Dalton Schultz is off the market too. I think you can go for a similar player if you want to get younger, and you can go for a Noah Fant or somebody with less injuries. I think that's fine, but I think that's probably a lateral move for next year. And quarterback, I think it's hard not to improve the position, but again, it feels like you're probably going from, an F to a D or an F to a C minus at quarterback play, unless you hit on a quarterback in the first round or Michael Penix or whatever, unless a guy hits.
Yeah.
It's a tough position.
Yeah. And so old man mom mentioned this, and someone else, I don't know if someone had DM'd me, I can't remember, to be honest with you, but he said the Giants trade, if you move from 3 to 6, the Giants have 2 second-round picks. So you could move from 3 to 6 and get 2 second-round picks this year. Instead of getting a first next year, you can get 2 second-round picks this year and kind of go from that point. Now,
and
is that more valuable? We can argue about that, but I like the idea with the depth of talent in this draft, especially at positions that you need. I like the idea of picking up 2 extra second-round picks, 2 extra top 50 picks. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think, and I like that because, if you stay at 6, I think you're pretty much guaranteed one of the top receivers. And you might not get Marvin Harrison Jr., but you might come away with Rome Odunze, and you're going to feel really good about that. And I think he'd be a great fit for New England. And with those second-round picks, you can draft and you can stay there. Or if you want to come back up the board because an offensive lineman falls and you want to move up from 34 to, 20 or something like that, you have the capital to do that and still have a second-round pick left over. So I think that gives you some options. And I think I am personally not in love with the quarterback class this year, outside of Caleb Williams and Drake May. And I don't think I think with how much investment this offense needs, I really don't hate a world where you stock up on picks and drafts a supporting cast.
Right. Well, and Ashton says, that he's tired of them trading back. And he's right. Like, they did trade back 2 years in a row. Of course, they got Gonzalez last year. And again, my contention is that...
It worked out last year really well.
Right. And my contention is that, and was from the beginning, was that when they traded back, they knew they were going to get one of Gonzalez or Zay Flowers. And they were okay with either guy. They knew they were going to get one of those guys. And so they were all right trading back because they knew, well, these guys are both really good. We're going to get one of them. We hope we get Gonzalez, but if it isn't, Zay Flowers is a good consolation prize, and we pick up some extra draft capital. So fine. And again, if you don't agree with that, that's okay. But right now, you're in a position where you have the number 3 pick. Okay? You have the number 3 pick. That pick is so incredibly valuable. And I'm sorry, it's more valuable than Marvin Harrison Jr., in my opinion. It's more valuable than him.
And I love him. I
love Marvin Harrison Jr.
It's so hard to pass up on a guy like that.
All right.
But
it's a massively huge position of value. And so if you can move down and pick up extra pieces, you can get another wide receiver. You can get the number 1 offensive tackle. You can get maybe even a quarterback, right? I don't know. Again, is the guy that they like, J.J. McCarthy? Are they looking at it saying, you know what, J.J. McCarthy's pretty good. We like him. We don't like him at 3. But if you tell me we can get him at 12, sure.
Where do the Vikings pick?
Vikings pick 11.
Because the other rumor here is the Vikings are in love with J.J. McCarthy
That's the smoke.
and willing
But
to trade up.
I can't imagine. Like, here's the thing about this. If they really feel that way, don't you think that all their leverage is gone? That the Patriots
Yes.
are like, we know you're in love with J.J. McCarthy. Well, sure, we'll trade you 3. Trade us 11 and your next 2 first-round picks.
Oh yeah, they can. What I'm
You
saying
know
is
what I
that
mean?
if you
Like,
end up what I'm saying is I think is if you move back from 3 at all, you're not getting JJ McCarthy because either unless you move back to 6, but even then I could see the Vikings moving up to 4 or 5 to go
right,
get
right.
McCarthy from what we've heard. And they
And
were
that's okay.
aggressive last year too, trying to move up
Right.
for a quarterback. So I expect them to go all in. And
Yeah.
if you could be the beneficiary of that and pick up a whole bunch of picks, you love it.
Right.
But I
Right.
wouldn't. I think if you move back at all, I wouldn't bank on any quarterback being there when the Patriots are on the board.
No, and I agree with you. You're not in my opinion, you're not trading back to draft a quarterback. You're not, right? Now, if one of those guys falls in your lap and you're like, this is a good value for him and we'll take him, fine. But you're trading back because you're like, none of these guys are good enough to take a 3. And again, I don't know how I feel about Jaden Daniels at 3. I don't know how I feel about Drake May at 3. I like Drake May and I like Jaden Daniels. I don't know how I feel about either of those guys at 3. So, that's the decision that you're making, right? Is either one of those guys good enough at 3? So we'll see. If there's a long off season to go, there's a long way to go. It's only a month and a half, but it just feels like forever.
Well, the next week's gonna go so fast.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So that's the good thing. So, all right. Speaking of next week, let's take a break. When we come back from that break, we're going to talk about free agent targets for the Patriots. Who we think they should go after? Who we think they should target? Probably just defensively. I don't know if there's any fringe offensive guys you want to talk about, but
I have 1 or 2 receivers I want to mention.
So we can get into that as well. But it's really interesting how, and we'll talk about this, but it's really interesting how they have so many needs on offense, but there's so many good defensive free agents. Like, just sign all the defensive free agents and draft all the offensive guys. So
Pats could be winning games, 7-6 with a touchdown coming from the defense next year.
That's right. So, but anyways, we'll see. So let's take a quick break and then we'll be back with some free agents. Football season may be over, but the action on the floor is heating up. Whether it's tournament season or the fight for playoff home court, there's no shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of year. Get in on the excitement with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can turn your hoops knowledge into serious cash. Now, Prize Picks even offers injury insurance so your entries stay in play, even if one of your players gets injured. For basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. Now, this week for me, I have Steph Curry for more than 29 points and Nikola Jokic for more than 10 rebounds. And then Caitlin Clark for more than 30 points and LeBron James for more than 7 assists. So download the app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right. So let's get into this defensive class, because this is where the money is. In my opinion, this is where the value is. You look at some of these defensive guys, and it's not just the value, it's the talent that's out there. Like, my goodness, there are some really talented guys. I think top of the list, #1 talented guy defensively has got to be Chris Jones. I think it's very unlikely he goes anywhere other than Kansas City. But I would be, Monday at noon, which I know it doesn't really start then, but the earliest I can possibly contact him, I would be contacting him saying, here's the check, put in what you want. Like,
Chris Jones I think he has 26 sacks over the last 2 seasons. It's defensive tackle. That's an astounding number. Elite pass rusher. Really good against the run when he wants to be too. He wasn't very good in the regular season because he didn't have to be, and he turned it on when it mattered.
Right.
He's not the same type of player. There's a little Lawrence Taylor to his game there, where he'll just pick his moments and show up.
Yep.
really the only concern with Chris Jones is that he does pick his moments, and the Patriots probably aren't going to be in a lot of moments next season.
True.
And he's older. So I think, I mean, if he wants the money, I think New England will pay him. I think the issue is he might just be, he'll be elite in New England, but it might not
matter.
Yeah, as much. You might be able to get similar production for a little bit cheaper with a guy who isn't quite as good. But if Chris Jones comes to New England, if you're an offensive coordinator, how are you game planning for the Chris Jones and Christian Barmore front? What are you doing?
Chris Jones, Christian Barmore, Matthew Judon, Keon White.
Yeah, and we're leaving the defensive ends out of it for now.
Right.
Like if it's just unless you're going to get your tackles involved in whoever's blocking a defensive tackle, like you're going to have your outside offensive lineman blocking down on a defensive tackle,
right?
You're going to have to leave one of them in a one-on-one matchup.
Yeah,
and that's probably going to be Christian Barmore a lot of the time, but they're also both mobile enough to do twists and stunts, and they can stuff the run. Scary. And I think it guarantees one-on-one opportunities for all of your edge rushers, essentially.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's a pipe dream. I think he's staying with Kansas City. I think he'd be silly to leave Kansas City. Again, Kansas City probably can't pay him what you can pay him, but like
they'll pay him. They'll make it work.
I don't know. I think they will.
They're looking at trading L'Jarius Sneed to keep Chris Jones, which, by the way, I think is the wise move.
It's interesting you mentioned L'Jarius Sneed because he's next on my list as the second best defensive player available. I know he's not technically a free agent. Andrew Callahan was on. I don't know if it was last night or tonight. I saw the tweet today. I think it was tonight. On whatever the show is on NBC Sports Boston, talking about trading for L'Jarius Sneed. Probably going to take a third round pick for the Patriots. I'm okay with trading 68 if it means getting him. So you trade 68, you got to pay him a boatload.
Yeah.
But I mean, imagine Christian Gonzalez and L'Jarius Sneed for the next 5 years, 10 years, like not 10, but for the next 5 years or so. Like L'Jarius Sneed's still young.
Yeah.
You know,
I think.
I mean, I don't know if they would do it, but holy crap, that dude's a baller. He is a baller,
and he's physical, which I like.
Right.
I think here's the thing: I don't think 68 gets it done. I'm not even sure 34 gets it done for New England because there's been a lot of talk about the Lions sending their first-round pick because they are very, very interested in him, and they have the cap space to do it.
And they could. They certainly could. I just going off what people were saying, because he was going to command so much money, there was a thought that it was probably going to be a second-round pick. And if the Patriots are able to send, say 68 and a fifth-round pick next year or something like that, you know what I mean? But you're probably right that he's going to end up going for, a late 20s pick or even a even a pick in the 30s or 40s or something like that. You know what I mean?
Or it might be the Lions trade. What do they have? 29, 30, whenever that is, for L'Jarius Sneed and like a fourth back or something like that.
Right.
I will say there's one part about this that does concern me with Sneed, and that's I have to go back and see if I can find it. But I was listening to some podcast last summer about how NFL teams are using analytics departments. Mm-hmm. And they mentioned how the Chiefs have something with their secondary that they have figured out analytically with player development and drafting and how to play them on the field, and that they are ahead of everybody else there. And if that's the case, the Patriots don't have that. Well, I mean, they probably have something. They do a good job with their corners, but they don't have what the Chiefs have. They don't have that intel. And, I do get a little bit scared about like, hey, we're going to give all this money to a corner who might go from being elite to just really good or great with you.
Right.
So I would love him in New England because, again, with his physicality and I think Christian Gonzalez's speed, I think that gives you two very different dynamics. And you can, any number one receiver that comes in New England, you have a matchup for him. Like however you want to play it, you've got a guy who can do it. But
well, and TJ does point out like Kool-Aid McKinstry sounds like he's dropping a little bit.
Yeah.
He's a guy that could be available at 34, right? And so maybe you say, all right, well, we draft a guy at 34. Now, obviously, Kool-Aid's got a little ways to go until he's good as L'Jarius Sneed. But that doesn't mean that, that you can't, that bringing him in would be a bad idea at 34. So there are ways to do it. I think you need to help the secondary. And look,
Yeah.
I mean, we already mentioned this. I mentioned this before the break, but like, I just feel like it's going to be a situation where you draft offensively and you sign and or trade defensively. Because again, you need young, talented, athletic offensive players. That's what you need. And you already have a young-ish defense that needs a little bit more talent on it because, you got to build all the time. But, like, you can get those guys in free agency. I just feel like, the offense needs so much help that it's like going out and getting a top-flight guy offensively, like, almost doesn't help you as much because there's not enough pieces around that guy, whereas you could do that defensively and makes it even better.
I don't think if you're going to get a top flight guy offensively, you might do it in a trade. Like, I think picks 3 and 34 and what comes with them kind of have to be offense. And like, if you're trading pick 34, but you're doing it for a Brandon Ayuk,
Right.
I would much rather do that and pay Ayuk than give the
Correct.
34 up for Snead.
I agree.
Even though
I agree with you on
they're
that.
probably comparable level players. And about the same thing. But I also know wide receivers are a lot more consistent in their production from year to year than corners are. Corners, my analogy for this is that like your defensive backs, especially your corners in football, are kind of like your bullpen is in baseball. You don't always know how well everybody's going to do, and it can change a lot from year to year. So, and you also use a lot of guys. So you just want to make sure you have a ton of guys you feel somewhat comfortable with, and then figure it out as you go along. And guys are going to have hot streaks and cold streaks. You're going to change it up. And like, sometimes you have your ace, your closer, that guy back there who's your number one, who you hope that's your Christian Gonzalez. But I also think Jonathan Jones is pretty good setup man if we want to keep running this analogy into the ground. And
it's a good point.
And Miles Bryant will probably come back. I think that's I think Christian.
And you get go ahead.
Christian Gonzalez, Jonathan Jones, Miles Bryant, Marcus Jones, Alex Austin. With what we saw of him last year, Isaiah Bolden. We didn't see much in the preseason, but he'll be back with the team. So. I like the depth. I think you're only looking for like 1 or 2 corner signings, maybe a depth veteran who can be a rotational guy and help you out. But even then, I think you feel pretty good about most of the guys you have if you had to go play a game today.
Right. I agree with you. So we'll see, right? We'll see. But I'm happy about Alex Austin. I am happy about the depth there at corner. I do think you could use another guy. I mean, honestly, it's just embarrassing riches, right? Like, getting a guy like L'Jarius Sneed, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, like now we have Gonzalez and Sneed. Like, this is incredible. So it takes what is already a very good defense into a dominant defense, at least, on the back end. And I think Justin Simmons, who just got cut by Denver, could be another guy like that, where I like the idea of Justin Simmons because he's more of a free safety than he is a strong safety. And we have a bunch of those hybrid safety guys, right? Kyle Duggar, of course, they gave the transition tag to.
Yeah, which we haven't even talked about on here.
We haven't even gotten to that, and we will. But they gave Kyle Duggar the transition tag. They have Peppers. They have Marte Mapu, however they're going to use him. Justin Simmons is a different kind of guy. He's a Devin McCourty type where he's more of a free safety than a strong safety. He tackles. He's a good tackler and everything like that, but he's more of a free safety, and they haven't had that guy since they lost Devin McCourty, and that could really help them, I think, defensively. And so I would be willing to throw some money at Justin Simmons and see if we can bring him in.
I think Xavier McKinney is a guy who also belongs in that conversation because I think one of the reasons Duggar had a bit of a down year last year was that he had to play more free safety. And he's not bad at it. He's pretty good at it, but he's most impactful when he can be around the line of scrimmage. Even you look at a guy like Devin McCourty. Devin McCourty played free safety for how long in New England? And still, when it was big situations, they'd put Deron Harmon back there at free safety and bring McCourty down by the line of scrimmage so he could be around the ball and interfere with things. And that's where Duggar and Peppers are at their best. So getting a high-flying free safety, I think, would be awesome. I think you can also sign someone cheaper. Deshaun Elliott, I know, is a name that has interested me in the past, who's again a free agent this year, who's a free safety. I think getting somebody who can play free safety and single high stuff at a decent level allows you to put Peppers and Duggar where they're at their best. And that helps your defense out a ton and still allows you to, rotate the dial like they like to do. Because Justin Simmons or Xavier McKinney or whoever can come down and play in the box, and Duggar can play free safety, and you can rotate them and confuse teams and still do all that stuff you want to do. You're basically just swapping out probably Jalen Mills for a guy who's a little bit better, deeper down the field than Mills is. Mills is also better up near the line of scrimmage.
Right. True. That's a good point. Geno Stone, go ahead.
No, I was going to say just Geno Stone's another name that's interesting for New England. He's going to have an interesting free agency market because he's one of those Ravens safeties, and kind of like New England, like they use their safeties in similar ways in a way that doesn't always translate when it goes to another team. But it's a name that, I wouldn't shock me if the Patriots are in on him.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, we'll see kind of how it goes, but I do think that there's a need for something on the back end there. And so, again, whether it's a safety, whether it's a corner, whatever it might be. And so we'll see where they go. Now, to get back to the transition tag from Kyle Duggar, Patriots put the transition tag on Kyle Duggar, just over $13 million. They get no compensation back. So now, of course, Felger Maz is screaming about it. This is so stupid what they're doing. This is so dumb. But the reason why the Patriots did that is because, yes, you're telling everyone, right? Go out in free agency, get the best offer you can, and then come back to us. I think there was a chance that, number one, they wanted to keep Duggar more than they wanted to keep Onwenu. That's number one. And number two, I think they may have been concerned that they weren't going to get a call back from Kyle Duggar if someone blew him away. And so by putting the transition tag on, you guarantee he has to call you back, right? You have no choice. The Patriots get to match any offer that gets made. The only thing about the transition tag is that you don't get any compensation if you let the guy walk. Now, it's $4 million cheaper than the franchise tag. And so that becomes that issue where you look at it and say, well, I think the safety market is going to be around $13 million. And by the way, they were right about that. They nailed that because look at all the safeties in the market. There's a ton of safeties in the market, which means they're all going to get a little bit less money. Calvin Ridley, we just talked about, is going to get paid like a wide receiver one because there's nobody out there. Someone's got to get paid that money, and it's going to be Calvin Ridley because he's the number one wide receiver out there. Duggar might be the best safety out there, but now you get a bunch of other safeties that are all pretty good out there. You don't have to overpay for Kyle Duggar if you need a safety, right? And so that becomes that. Yeah.
And to go with that, the transition tax at $13.8 million, something in that range.
Yeah.
That's probably about what you were going to pay Kyle Duggar anyway. That's around what New England was comfortable with. That's about what his market is. Onwenu, it's a little bit tougher to tell what his market is, but based on numbers, at least before the Dotson contract, seemed like he was going to get 15 to 18 million a year, probably. The offensive line transition tags $19 million. So you're overpaying for him. If you're willing to pay $19 million for him, you'll just sign him at that number in free agency.
Right. Right.
I think this is also where the agent part comes into play because there's no buffer between New England and Michael Onwenu right now. It's just they're negotiating.
Yeah.
And that's a situation where if you tag the player, they might get a little bit upset because there is no buffer, there is no agent involved. It's going to feel a lot more personal.
Right.
The flip side of
this is just business. And he's like, no, screw them. I don't want to play under the tag,
Yeah. And the flip side of this is that because, you want to establish that trust, if he does have a good relationship with the guys in New England, which there's no reason to think he doesn't, this is a situation where you can let Onwenu just go out and say, hey, we like you. We want to keep you. We're going to let you go out and see what your market is. Go collect offers. Enjoy your free agent experience. Get told how much you're worth by everybody. Come back here and Assuming the number's right, we'd love nothing more than to match it or exceed it and make sure you're back here in New England.
Right.
And that's a way to make sure the player, feels the trust of the organization and is bought in. And also, as a team, you make sure you're not overpaying for a guy, or you don't think you're going to be, getting a value back at all on the deal. And when you put all this together, like I think the transition tag for Duggar made a ton of sense, and not tagging on Wenu also made a ton of sense for both the monetary and the personal factors involved. And that's kind of where I land on it.
No, agreed. So we'll see. All right, a few more defensive guys that I wanted to chat about really quick. Christian Wilkins, we talked about already a little bit. I wouldn't throw as much money at him as I'd throw at Chris Jones, but it'd be awfully close. He's young still. He's a dominant defensive tackle. He's really good against the run. And again, it's a situation where you pair him up with Barmore, and all of a sudden that defensive line is outrageous. So, I like the idea of bringing someone like him in. And then Danielle Hunter as well. I know he's an edge guy, but like especially if you're worried about Matthew Judon and you don't know if he's going to, which by the way, you have to bring Matthew Judon back. I'm just say that right now. You have to bring Matthew Judon back.
Well, and the way he's talking in the press, I'm not worried about that. Like he'll be here. He's openly negotiating to try to get people to come to New England. He wants to be here, and
I agree with you. So, but even still, Danielle Hunter, I know at this point in his career isn't necessarily an elite pass rusher anymore. But I do think that, look, you need a bunch of edge guys. And if the price is right, I wouldn't hate at all bringing in a guy like Danielle Hunter. And then Devin White was the last guy on the list. His numbers dropped significantly last year. I don't think he was quite as good last year as he was in years past.
Mm-hmm.
But I take a shot. I take a shot at him and bring him in as and put him under the tutelage of Donta Hightower and see if, we can bring some of that greatness back.
I want to throw out a couple other front seven names. One of them, DJ Reader at defensive tackle. Played before with the Texans, then with the Bengals. Big run-stuffing nose tackle who can also be productive as a pass rusher, or at least impactful. He doesn't always rack up sacks, but he'll get you some pressures. Just a big boy out there, and he's a real man on the line, and I would like that a lot. He kind of replaces that Lawrence Guy role, but he can play over the nose for you and let Christian Barmore work more from the outside, which I think is very valuable. And also, it's less of a burden on Devon Godshaw to be a true nose tackle. He can play a little bit more outside.
Very true.
Which I think helps you all around. Another defensive tackle name that's worth throwing out there, I think, is Adam Butler, because he's a free agent again, and he was good in New England.
Yep.
With Daniel Akwale being here, I don't know if there's a role for Adam Butler, because I think there's a lot of similarities, but I think it's worth saying the name. Then the other edge rusher is Andrew Van Ginkel from the Dolphins.
He would be a great fit, I think.
And he's a fit in New England's scheme, I'm pretty sure. And he might be a guy who would be a good Uche replacement, who might just be a better fit for what you do and a better value. So that's another name I think I would keep an eye on for New England here. It's a bummer, but Josh Allen is not hitting the market. He got franchise tagged by the Jaguars. That's a defensive Josh Allen. And Brian Burns also got franchise tagged for Carolina, and I'd love him in New England. Not on a trade, though. A signing would have been awesome, but I'm not trading for him. Which, by the way, can we talk about how Carolina bungled that? Because they're
so dumb.
The Rams were going to send 2 first-round picks for Brian Burns, and they turned down the trade, and now they're not even negotiating anything long-term with him. It sounds like he might get traded, and
they said it was reported 2 first-round picks and more, which is just insane.
That was the start of it, and that Carolina front office is so out of whack. You just can't turn. If you value him that much, then you shouldn't be having any issues with the deal. The problem was once you turn that down and it gets made public, Burns has so much leverage. He could just hold you over a barrel, and they're in they're in a tough position there with that. But they've made their own bed. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, it just I understand he's a good player, and I'm not saying he's not a good player. He's a very good player. But like at a certain point, what are we even talking about? 2 first-round picks for a defensive end? An extremely good player. And I'm not saying he isn't an extremely good player, but like 2 first-round picks for a guy on your defense. I know he's a young guy. I know you want to build around him, quote unquote, everything else, but like, golly, man, like I just that's crazy.
And this is like, if assuming he does end up getting moved here, this is going to be 3 straight off seasons or 3 straight seasons where the Panthers are giving away their best player.
Yeah.
They did it with Christian McCaffrey. They did it with DJ Moore, and now they'd be doing it with Brian Burns. And it's just,
yeah, makes
no
sense.
And it would be one thing if you're using the assets to build something, but they're not.
Right.
It's not working. The assets
That's the thing. Right.
Not being used properly. So, yeah, that's glad we're not Panthers fans.
Yeah. God.
Yeah. Do we want to jump back over to the offense real quick? Because I had a couple of wide receivers I wanted to circle back on and mention.
Let's do that, but just first, really quick. Old Man Mom mentioned Darius Williams and Bryce Huff. 2 guys. I think Williams was cut, I believe. And I think Huff, his contract just ran out, I think. Either way, Williams, 5'9" corner, on the smaller side, played for Jacksonville last year. Like he's fine. I don't know. I mean, as a low end kind of veteran guy, I wouldn't hate it, but like I don't.
He could be your Jalen Mills replacement,
right?
Guy.
Yeah.
I think if you're gonna sign a corner, you go for somebody with a little bit more size, just because you want that. I think you feel good about your depth at slot corner. Right. You want more depth on the outside.
I agree. And then Huff is a linebacker, got some speed, a little bit of athleticism. I don't hate
Josh
it.
Uche in his game. He's one of those guys who's like hyper efficient as a pass rusher, but not a whole lot of reps. Right. I wouldn't hate it, but I think if we were going down that path, I think you'd rather just keep Josh Uche in the building,
right?
Unless that price gets,
that's the thing. Unless someone outpays him, or someone goes crazy on him. So, and don't even expect it as I'm about to report you. Okay, Marcus getting cut, dude. I'm about to report you for that, dude. Marcus Jones is not going anywhere. All right.
Yeah. Not speaking of that, before we jump back over to the offense, did you see Mac Wilson immediately before the show?
Yeah, he saw. I
just tweeted eyeball emojis. I think he might be back, which I hope he is. He was much better last year than I think anybody expected. We all were surprised when he was re-signed because he ended the previous year in the doghouse. But
I hated him. I was like, what the hell are they doing? This is so stupid.
But figuring out how to use him as that third linebacker who could be a pass rusher and like your kind of jack of all trades, like I don't know, with Tavai and Bentley being as good as they were, and also Duggar and Peppers being as good as they were at those roles, they could kind of shore things up and let Mac Wilson freelance just a little bit and be a pass rusher and play with his head on fire and not worry about being sound or anything like that, because that's not who he is. He's just an athlete who you can throw out there and let him go, and when everything else behind him was good, then he can be your difference maker, which he was at points.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. All right, what do you got?
There's the first name on this list is one that we still don't know if he's I'm gonna jump back for a second. We didn't talk about Hollywood Brown that much. I haven't heard much about his free agency at all. But if he's out there, I think he's a really at the right price. He's a really intriguing option for New England because he's been productive at points.
Yeah,
he has speed that actually translates to the field.
It does, yeah,
and he has former first-round pick. This is the type of guy they've always brought in when it was Philip Dorsett or whomever. Obviously, Brown has been a lot more productive than Philip Dorsett ever was, and he's a better player. But as long as the money isn't crazy on this, I think he's a guy I'd think about because he brings something different to your offense. You can plug him in as, I don't know if he's going to play a true X receiver, but he can be an outside receiver for you and use his speed and stretch the field a little bit and just help you out. So I think he intrigues me. But if that's not reasonable, the guy who interests me is Rashid Shaheed from the Saints.
Okay.
Who's an All-Pro as a returner last year.
Yeah.
But he was a he's an exclusive rights free agent, I believe is what it stands for. So at any point, I don't know when the deadline is. I would assume next Monday. At any point, the Saints can just bring him back. He doesn't have any control over it, but they don't have a lot of cap space, and they still haven't to this point as we're doing this on Thursday night. So if he does hit the market as a speedster, deep threat gadget guy, he has been incredibly efficient. He had like 4 or 5 touchdowns, I think, of over 40 yards last year. He's a big play guy, and that's what this offense needs. And I think he's a guy you can bet on improving, taking a bigger role in your offense. You know, if it's Rashid Shaheed and Kendrick Bourne and the guys they had, I think you got a little bit more athleticism and some speed, and you know, you can make things work.
I like that a lot. I like Shaheed a lot. Again, I have concerns about, trying to increase his role by too much.
Yeah.
I think he was, incredibly efficient, but I don't know how much more I want to push on that. But like, man, he just got speed for days, so I'm okay with that. Another Saints guy who, former Assumption College graduate, former Assumption Greyhound, Deontay Hardy, who was released as well. He's more of a return guy than he is a receiver, and the Patriots don't necessarily need a return guy. And especially with the kickoff stuff. I mean, Marcus is a great punt returner. He's decent. He's a good kick returner too, but he's a great punt returner. I just don't know how much kickoffs matter, or are kickoffs going to matter? I don't really.
It sounds like they're trying to make it matter.
All of the things, right? So if kickoffs are going to matter, you want a good kickoff returner. And if Hardy is willing to, I mean, he was an All-Pro a few years ago, so he may command a little bit more money than you're willing to pay him. But like, if you can get him for not too much money, it'd be pretty cool to have him back in Massachusetts.
Yeah, no, I think I'd like him. I think there's a fit there. By the way, so the kickoff rule, I know, honestly, it's gotten a lot of hate online, but honestly, I don't hate it. What they're talking about is there's going to be two things. One, I think they're going back to like the older onside kick style where you can get more of a run up and you have a much better chance at recovering it. But you can only do an onside kick when you declare that you're going to do an onside kick in advance. And, there's some limitations around when you can do it. So your kickoff becomes like you're either kicking the PAT or going for the 2-point conversion. So you're declaring onside kick or regular kickoff. And if it's a regular kickoff, I think what is it? The guys start further back. I'm not entirely sure about where people align, but I do know nobody can start running until the ball like gets down the field and like inside the 20-yard line or gets touched or whatever. And if you just kick the ball on the fly into the end zone, the touchback comes out to the 35.
Right.
So the whole incentive is to basically have more kickoff returns. So you're going to have to kick the ball short of the end zone, but also they're changing the alignment and the run up you can get. So there's less collisions and less injuries.
Right.
Which you're going to like.
It's definitely interesting. And it will promote more kickoffs, more kick returns, I would think. But yeah, it's just so weird. It's just a weird rule. And so we'll see how it works. But Inspector Des says 35 seems like that's insane. Like that's really far.
Well, and so there's two different touchbacks too, because if you kick the ball straight into the end zone, the ball comes out to the 35. If you kick the ball short of the end zone and it rolls in, it's at the 20. So basically what they're saying is if you try to, you have to kick it so that the returner has a chance to get it outside of the end zone and return it.
Correct.
That's basically the way these rules are going to be, and you're going to get punished if you don't do that.
What's so funny is that when they had first moved the kickoff up, that's what Bill did, right? Was he kicked it high and let his return guys get down there, right? And which is funny. And so I don't know, man. It's a whole weird thing. It looks strange. Of course we're all like, this is so stupid, and the rule is this, and we hate change, and then it's going to happen, and we're going to be like, you know what? That's kind of fun. I want more kickoffs. Belichick talked about this when they moved the extra point back to the 15, his argument to the league was basically like, it doesn't matter. It's an irrelevant play. Nobody cares about the extra point. He didn't say this, but like the extra point happens. All right, we score a touchdown. All right, I'm taking a bathroom break. It doesn't matter. We know the extra point's in. Who cares?
Yeah,
right?
when it was at the
No
2
there's
before.
no incentive to go for 2 because you have a extra point from the 1 yard line. Who cares, right?
Yeah. And now it's like it
never
goes
made
from
a
like a
difference.
99% to like a 90%. And
Right,
that's
and
a huge
It's a
difference.
massive difference, a 10% difference. And so, so we'll see. But it's the same type of thing where it's like, all right, I'm going to the bathroom. There's a break. Or even if I'm like behind, I just fast forward right to the kickoff. I'm like, I don't even need to watch that kickoff. It's going to be a touchback every time. If you're smart, you just kick out of the end zone. Who cares, right? So
it wasn't a kick return in the Super Bowl, I don't think.
No, I don't think so either. And so it's like you want those plays. You want plays to happen. And so that's the idea, is that just make every play an actual play. And I think that you're trying to get towards that.
And I actually, I'll credit the NFL here. Their initiative for a long time was, we're basically trying to get rid of the kickoff because there's too many injuries on it and it's not that valuable of a play. And now they've realized, hey, we like the kickoff. To start, I think there's aesthetic reasons there. It's been the way that a football game has started since we've been doing this whole thing. And when you think of the Super Bowl, you think of all the flashbulbs going off in the opening kickoff. And that becoming kind of meaningless, I think, is tough. And it costs people jobs because there's guys who get in for what they can do on special teams. I think, they wanted to get that more involved. And I think them taking another look at this and saying, yes, we want less kickoffs because we want less injuries, but also we want enough kickoffs that this is an interesting play. How can we get both? It sounds like they consulted a bunch of special teams coaches to craft this it's still to be decided rule, to be confirmed rule. It does sound like it is going to become a rule change, but being able to get the best of both worlds here, ideally, where you still see, the reduced injuries and not these huge collisions that you'd get that would really hurt people on kickoff sometimes, but you still do get the actual kickoff and the change in field position that that can happen because of it, and your big plays, your game-changing plays. I think in the year that Devin Hester got into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, talking about this rule change is perfectly timed.
Yeah, and you're totally right about that, right? And imagine if Devin Hester didn't have to return kicks. Let's just imagine that, right? And it's so fun. What's so funny about it is that Devin Hester. Devin, whatever. We can talk about Devin Hester forever, but like that Super Bowl, I'll never forget that Super Bowl because Devin Hester was so good. They just literally kicked out of bounds every time. They're like, we don't even care, dude. We're just kicking out of bounds. Like we'll let you take the ball at the 40-yard line. We're not letting this guy return the ball again, right? So that would be a situation where you just try to kick it out of the end zone. Like, just see you later. We don't even care about you. And so, take it at the 35. Go ahead, whatever. But the 35 is that's a huge advantage for the return team. A huge advantage. So, we'll see. I like the idea of changing that. So, all right, you had another wide receiver. I cut you off before you gave another wide receiver.
Let me go through my list here. I think Gabe Davis is on this list. He worries me because I think you worry about a Nelson Aguilar 2.0 in signing your speedster with questionable hands who, might not do well in a bigger role. Yeah. Gabe Davis is a guy who will win you games. He will lose you games.
Mm-hmm.
And at the price he's probably going to command, I don't think I'm that interested in him, but he's a guy who's going to be on the market. DJ Chark is out there. He had a tough time in Carolina last year, but I think we can kind of throw away all of the Carolina tape. Is a true outside guy who, if they hopefully move on from Devontae Parker at some point, I think can assume the X receiver duties until somebody else takes it from him, whether it be somebody who's drafted or whatever it ends up being. So I think he's interesting. He's had success in places, and Tyler Boyd is another name that's out there because now that T. Higgins is staying in Cincinnati, we think, and they don't if they don't trade him. I'm just not that interested in Tyler Boyd personally,
right?
Because I think he's good, but he's not great. He's probably going to be a little more expensive than you'd like. He's a little bit older now, and he plays the same role as Demario Douglas. And Pop Douglas is your best receiver last year. I don't want him off the field. You'll think you're trying to sign guys who play outside.
Yeah.
So maybe Juwan Jennings can be in that role. He's a free agent. The last time they signed a guy from the 49ers, it worked out.
Good. Yeah.
But even it's funny. Like, you watch Juwan Jennings and you see him put on a Super Bowl MVP level performance. And then you look at his stats. He has less than 1,000 career receiving yards.
It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe that's just being, the fifth, sixth wheel in an offense.
He's buried in the depth chart, but yeah, I don't know. Do you feel like if he was that good, they'd get him on the field more, right?
Well, he's not a speaker. He's almost like a possession tight end in some ways, the way he gets used, because he's there on third downs a lot. And he's got like the big catch radius, and he's like, when everybody else draws the coverage and he gets the single team and it's a big play, he can make it.
Yeah.
But
or they call him third and Juwan, right? Like, I mean, it's
who's drawing that coverage, and who's drawing that coverage for him?
Right.
In New England.
Right. And so that's the problem, is that he's getting, if we bring in Juwan Jennings, he might be getting the number one corner. And so then it's like, well, things are a little different when you don't have, Ayuk and Deebo Samuel out there. So,
and we're talking receiving options. There's a tight ends too. Dalton Schultz and Jonnu Smith are both off the market, who I thought could be interesting names for New England. The next guy up is Noah Fant. I think Gerald Everett too could be in this conversation. And he's a guy who's basically played exclusively out on the West Coast, and he's been in the McVay offense. He's been in the Seattle offense. He's been in a lot of these offenses that I think New England's modeling after. So, if Hunter Henry isn't going to be the guy, Gerald Everett being a replacement, I think works. I don't think you're going to see a huge change in things. I also don't hate a world where you bring back Hunter Henry and Pharaoh Brown and go sign, Noah Fant or Gerald Everett to replace what you got from Mike Gesicki. Yeah. That said, none of these guys are exceptional blockers still, and I still do wonder about what your two tight end. I don't know how you play a two tight end offense, but neither tight end is anything better than meh as a blocker.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Old Man Mob was asking about Donovan Peoples-Jones. Peoples-Jones is the guy that played under Alex Van Pelt in Cleveland, had 61 catches, I think, in 2022, and then was traded midseason last year. Kind of fell out of favor. Had 13 catches total this year.
He's right next to Devontae Parker in all of these separation statistics. And I'm a Michigan guy. I like my Michigan guys, but Peoples-Jones, I think, is. I don't hate the idea of getting him as like a cheap option, as like a high upside guy. Maybe you get something out of him, but I don't know how dependable he is, and there's a lot of redundancy with he and Parker. I can tell you. Right.
Maybe cut Devontae Parker. Send him out the pasture. We should do that anyways.
Yeah.
So
I got one other free agent name.
Okay.
That I think is just worth mentioning in here. This is we're going to a backup offensive lineman here.
Oh baby!
I wanted to get his name in because I wrote about him yesterday. Nick Harris has been a backup center for the Browns, basically the whole time with Alex Van Pelt. He's been good when he's gotten on the field. He hasn't had to do too much, but he's backup interior offensive lineman, can play center, solid. But they wanted to get him on the field this past year, so they started using him at fullback. And he was pretty good at it. He's a free agent. He's got the chemistry. They need depth on the interior offensive line, and they could use a fullback. And you add in the relationship, and it's like, all right, this is the kind of value signing that I think New England could make, where you get David Andrews insurance, a guy who can be your sixth offensive lineman. You could be your James Ferentz replacement there as your guy who's just kind of a veteran who's there, who plays a bunch of different spots. And he can do some funky things for you. And
it's great.
Yeah, it's not, you're not going to use all $100 million you got in free agency on, luxury items. So right. I think I like this guy. So that's my pitch on him.
So good. I'm a fan. Let's do it. Come on, let's do it. Why not?
Old Man Mom asked, will the Pats bring the fullback back? I think they will, because that's something that like Alex Van Pelt always had in that Cleveland offense. If they didn't have a traditional fullback, they were converting somebody or using tight ends to play that
Right.
role. And they're going to have somebody who's good in that role, I think. I don't think it's going to be like what it was last year in New England.
I would agree. Yeah, whether it be
Yeah.
a Juszczyk, I think they. I mean, obviously, Juszczyk is a great player. If you can get I'd rather a guy. I would say more of a Juszczyk guy than a Devlin guy. I'll put it to you that way. I think that's probably what we'll see.
Yeah, and I also think with quarterback still very much a question mark, and defense is getting lighter. If they don't like the pass, if they don't think they're going to be a good passing offense this year, then invest in the running game and for the short term,
that'll work.
That's something.
Right. Agreed.
And it's like you said, the fullback and Gregory Stevens in the chat too. The fullback can catch. Gives you some options off of play action. Which actually, if you check out my article on patspulpit.com about the interior offensive lineman, you'll see this Browns backup center playing fullback, and in the clip, it's a play action rep where they use him and they have him cut blocking some defensive lineman who gets through on a naked bootleg with Joe Flacco going to the weak side or whatever on a huge touchdown to Amari Cooper. And it's, that sounds fun. I don't know if this New England team's going to be good next year, but give me a couple plays like that.
Yeah, that'd be great. That's what we want to see. Give me a backup center running routes in the flat. Come on. That's great.
It cannot, I promise you, it cannot be worse than some of the receiving we've seen in New England the last couple of years.
You got that right. One position we kind of skipped over was quarterback. We talked about Baker. I like the idea. I love the idea of Brissett coming back. I think it makes a ton of sense. He's a leader. He's a guy in the locker room that I think everyone likes. He was universally well liked here when he was here. He's been well liked everywhere he's gone. So I think that would be a great fit. Gardner Minshew. I like Gardner Minshew, but
he's a fine backup option.
He's fine.
If you miss on Brissett if Brissett goes for way more than anybody thought, then sure, Minshew.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of how I feel about it. And listen, if you run it back, if Brissett starts all year for you, are you going to be like a playoff team? No. But, he can be a good guy for you. And especially, and I know they're not the same player at all, but I do think the parallels between him and Michael Penix are enough that he would be a good mentor for Penix, right? They're both, semi-athletic guys, but they're not running with the ball.
They're athletic in like the young Ben Roethlisberger kind of athleticism.
Right, exactly, yes. Right.
Yeah.
But avoiding, I mean, Penix is one of the best guys in college football at avoiding the rush and avoiding sacks. And, and Brissett does a nice job of that too. Even though he's not running for first downs necessarily, he will occasionally if he has to, just like, any quarterback would. But he does a nice job of kind of avoiding the pressure. So
yeah, and the nice thing about Brissett too,
with him, so.
And Brissett's the kind of guy where you can sign him, and if you have to start him, you don't feel bad about it. Especially let's say you don't draft a quarterback at all. Let's say you hate it. The situation where you come away with no rookie quarterbacks, you can start Brissett for a season. You're going to get competent quarterback play, and you're going to be. Especially some of the other teams out there, you're going to get top 27 quarterback play in the 100%. NFL probably.
Yep.
And maybe not much better than that, but that's still an improvement from last year. But he's also not so good. Like, you're not investing so much money into him. He's not going to have the expectations of being a franchise guy. So when you do inevitably draft someone, you don't have to worry about locker room issues. He can be a mentor. He can help the guy develop. I think that is also valuable because, you sign a Baker Mayfield, and I like Baker Mayfield, but he's not necessarily the mentor type. I don't think, especially if you're getting $40 million a year.
Well, yeah, of course not. Right.
No, but yeah, I will say if they sign Baker, I'd be okay with up to 4 years on the deal. That's how far I'd go out, with the caveat that you need an easy out after year 2. That's where you need to be able to pull the ripcord. And I think I'd go as high as 33, maybe $35 million a year for him, looking at, what Geno Smith got and what Daniel Jones got, who I think are probably the market comparisons for him. But start with a 4 is not going to. If it was 3 years, $100 million and nothing guaranteed after year 2, I think I would sign that and feel pretty good.
Yeah, I agree with you. We'll see. But that's I don't I don't hate that idea. I hate the idea of paying him $40 million. I don't hate that idea. So, we'll see. All right, you got anything else, or you want to go into our final few segments here?
I think we can go to our final few segments.
Okay. All right. Do you have a trivia question?
No, I totally forgot to do.
It's fine.
Yeah,
nope,
so we're
good.
gonna. I'll do the announcement now because we have to announce our winner for that. And I totally forgot to do that too. So we're not gonna do trivia next Thursday either because it's gonna be all free agency stuff with that going on. So 2 Thursdays from now, or whenever our show is that next week, we'll announce our trivia winner for the last section, and we'll start up a new session of trivia. Maybe we'll do one off-season one, and we'll maybe do the questions a little bit more spread out. I don't know, but
yeah, we'll see. By the way, Gregory Stevens over here is talking about Fields. I'm out. I think I'm out on Fields. I just don't think he fits with what we want to do.
No, I fully agree there. Yeah, with AVP, it doesn't make sense. If he were available for like a 5th round pick, then sure, I'd think about it. But even then, I love Fields coming out. He was my number 2 quarterback in that draft, and you just haven't seen the progression as a passer.
No.
And when you only have 1 year left on the contract, and it's not the cheapest quarterback contract, in some ways you'd rather use that 5th on if Spencer Rattler were there, which at this point he probably won't be. But if he were there, I'd rather use the 5th on Spencer Rattler than Justin Fields, even though Fields has had more NFL success.
Agreed. All right, let's get into this then. If that's the case, let's go right into this.
And now for something we think you'll really like. This week in sports history.
All right. You want to go first? I have 2. You want me to go first?
I can go first.
Let's do it.
On this day in 1996, Magic Johnson became the 2nd NBA player to reach 10,000 career assists.
Okay, that's a good one. I like that. 10,000 career assists. 1996?
Yeah.
It's wild to think that Magic was still playing in 96, but yeah. Man, I wish Larry Bird's back had not been destroyed. That sucks. What are you gonna do? All right, I have 2. They're both completely insane. And so you're welcome already. Thad Skywalker says this week in sports history, Peyton Manning announced his retirement. I think it was the anniversary of that was like a day or 2 ago. But certainly this week in sports history.
The on this day in sports history site is telling me that's today.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. How about that? It was today. Yep, that's a good one, Thad. I have from 1857, baseball announces that 9 innings constitutes an official game. Before 1857, the game ended. It's so stupid.
Oh boy.
The inning in which one team reached 21 runs. That's when the game ended. So, there you go. So,
wow,
a little bit of a different game back in 1857.
A lot's changed.
And then I found 0 information on this. I looked it up. The only thing I could find was the New York Times posted. The New York Times will post just the one page of all the little blurbs or whatever, and the blurb was there, but the picture was blurry, and I couldn't zoom in enough to actually read what the blurb said. But on this day in 1930, Georgetown High of Chicago beat Homer in basketball. Fine. The final score of the game, 1-0. I have
before
no idea.
The shot clock right there.
I have no idea how it happened. I don't know if it was literally the shot clock got ran out. I don't know if a guy went up for a layup in the first minute of the game, got fouled, hit 1 free throw, and then they called the game for some reason. I have no idea what happened. I couldn't find any information on it, but I can attest that there was a blurb in the New York Times on March 8th, 1930, saying that some team had won 1-0. So,
if you look at basketball stuff pre-shot clock, there's some real weird scores because it was all a possession game. It was all
right.
Yeah. But by the way, if you want a weird little basketball anecdote, I just remember this quote. I did a story on when they added the 3-point line college basketball back in the 80s. And I was looking at some newspaper clippings from the time, and you've got Coach K going out there talking about how his team can't hit threes and they don't know what they're doing. And you got the Seton Hall coach at the time claimed that he had his players, every one of his players, shooting nothing but 3-pointers all week long to prepare for it, and nobody could hit a single one.
Oh my
all
God.
these coaches complaining about something that is now, that's the thing in
I love
basketball, the 3-pointer.
Yeah,
So,
it's crazy. It's crazy when you look at it and think how much the game has changed. It's almost a completely different game than what it was back then. Obviously, they added the shot clock, right? That obviously changes things. But the way that the 3-point line makes such a difference, they move the 3-point line back, then they move the 3-point line back up, right? And so they've made a bunch of different changes. And so it is interesting to see, to see kind of how it goes and how it's changed. And I think, some parts of the game are better than they were. Some parts of the game are worse than they were. And that's the way it is with everything, right? But it is fascinating to see, and the other part of it, and this is where what pisses me off about the way we talk about basketball is that guys like Bill Russell and Bob Cousy and guys like that wouldn't be able to hang with these guys. And some part of that is 100% true. Obviously, they played in a different era. But at the same time, if Bill Russell had been born in 1994, right, instead of whenever the hell he was born, right, in the 20s probably, he looked very different. He's probably born in the 30s, by the way, not the 20s. But he would have been a very, very different player, right,
yes,
than what he ended up being when he played basketball, right? So, let's not pretend like that makes a difference. He would have looked completely different if he had all the training that these guys had and played AAU from the time he was 6 years old until whenever. He would have been incredible. He would have been the best player in the NBA probably. And so that's the type of shit that annoys the hell out of me, where I'm like, dude, would you just stop it with that, man? I know it's old time basketball, but what do you want them to do? That's the era they played in. It's not their fault.
The cross era stuff gets weird. It's also one of the reasons why, to a degree, I object to the whole idea of a GOAT conversation in a lot of sports, because things are so different in different eras. And I think separating it by era is important.
Agreed.
Because obviously, Michael Jordan against LeBron, if you just put the two of them against one another as they were, LeBron would kill him. Why? Because he grew up later in a different era of basketball with much more skill development from a younger age and much better muscle routines and things like that.
Right.
But they were both the greatest of their era, and I think that's kind of what matters. They never did play against each other, and who cares?
Right, and that's the thing, right? And it's funny to see that stuff, right? And to look at it and say, okay, who's better and who was this and who was that? And it's like, well, I don't know, and then you can make the argument, well, this guy was that, and this guy did this, and it's like, all right, I get it, and then that's the argument. Well, Jordan played in the time when, you could hand check, and the defense was a lot more physical, and there's a lot more physicality in the game, and these guys are incredible athletes, but there's far less physicality in the game than there was back then, right? And so, would these guys be able to deal with that? And so it's just all of those different things come into play,
To a degree, though, I will push back on that, because I know we talk about how physical the 90s were in the NBA, and they were at points. But I think only the fouls were more when you fouled somebody, you'd hit them harder, and you do more stuff like that. But apart from that, I think a lot of the other parts of it actually were a lot less physical. I think box outs and a lot of the fights you see in the paint today are a lot more physical than they were back then. Maybe that's just me.
No, I don't think,
because I went back and watched 90s stuff, and I was told that this was the most physical basketball ever was. And then I watched clips, and I was like, this looks like the YMCA when I go down to play.
No, and I can see part of that. I think the hand checking for me is the biggest part, right? Where it's
that's where it's
can get up in that guy's grill and really get into him and get your arm into him, and it's not a foul, right? And whereas now it is, right? And so, obviously, like you said, the strength training and everything else makes a big difference, but it is interesting. I mean, look, it's the same way where if Jim Brown, just the way Jim Brown was, if dropped him into 2024, Jim Brown couldn't hang with these guys. He wasn't fast enough. He wasn't whatever. But in his era,
that's not the standard.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. Like in his era, he's the best player ever. Like he just was completely unstoppable and was one of the best lacrosse players of all time. Right. But like, it's not, you can't compare what's going on now to what's going on there. So it's just like, that's it. It's, you have to appreciate, in my opinion, appreciate the people for who they are and what they did and everything else like that. And you move on from there. But that's just the way it goes, and people are never going to agree on it. So it just is what it is. But they're fun conversations to have, I guess. So,
yeah.
Anyways,
all right. We're talking 90s basketball. So I think that's time to wrap.
I know. I think we're ready to go. But thanks for tuning in again, guys. We appreciate it. Matt will be back Monday night with a special guest.
Mm-hmm. We're going to be a little bit earlier Monday night.
Oh, then maybe I won't make an appearance then. Never mind.
Yeah.
So
we're doing, I think we're going to be 8:30 on Monday is the plan.
Okay. So I probably won't be making an appearance, but you never know. Yeah, I might go back to my room in the hotel, depending on what people are doing after the conference. Maybe I'll go back to my room in the hotel and jump on. I will have my laptop anyways, because I'll be working out there. So maybe I'll jump on from the hotel room. We'll see. But either way, but thank you to the chat for hitting us up as always. We appreciate it. And we'll be back next week with you, going over Matt's mock draft. Is it 3.0?
Yes. 3.0. I got to write that still.
Golly. No. You're hard at work on it. You've already started it.
Yeah,
You've already outlined it.
I've had this
you did
for weeks now.
You're just switching it up as you go. That's all. Outline is already done. That's it. No one has to know whether it's written or not. You know what I mean? So all right, guys. Thanks. Appreciate it. And we'll talk to you next week.